We Live in Time is definitely one of the saddest movies of the year, and you're probably going to need to bring your tissues for this one because you will get a little misty-eyed. But on the other hand, it's also a pretty funny movie as well, so let's talk about this thing because I really enjoyed it. Now, as always, if you want to see what I gave this movie out of 10, head over to my shorts, TikTok, or Instagram and check out my one-take movie review on this movie. But without further ado, let's talk about We Live in Time. So in this, we follow a couple by the names of Almond and Tobias, of course played by Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield, as we watch their love story unfold after Florence Pugh's character Almond gets diagnosed with cancer. Starting things off with the good, and we of course have Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh. I mean, they were great in this thing. They were the reason I went to go see this movie, and they absolutely delivered. And in my opinion, they both gave some of the best performances of their careers. I mean, their chemistry just jumps right off the screen, and when they are on screen together in this thing, this movie is at its best. They also each had their own individual moments separate of each other, and I'll start with Andrew Garfield, and man, the more I see this guy in movies, the more and more I am amazed at just how talented of an actor he is, the raw emotion that he was able to show in this movie, whether it was joy, anger, sadness, and trust me, there was a lot of sadness, but he pretty much hit every emotion there was in this movie, and he did it beautifully. There was an argument that he had with Florence Pugh's character in this movie, and it was just one of those scenes where you just had to say, wow, because he was phenomenal in it along with Florence Pugh, and it was probably one of my favorite parts of the movie. But as good as Andrew was, he kind of turned into a supporting role because as this movie went on, it very much became Florence Pugh's movie because the plot kind of put more of a focus on her character's journey. She was phenomenal throughout this whole thing, and her character was also a chef, so we got to see her fight and make the most of the moments that she had left, all for the sake of her daughter. Florence Pugh gave her character this silent strength that I really don't know how to explain. I mean, her character was dealing with this horrible illness throughout this entire movie, but just kind of kept on going like she was completely healthy, and that was a really cool part of her character and was maybe even the point of her character, that even though she was dealing with this illness, she was not going to let it stop her from enjoying her life and cherishing those little moments. So yeah, kudos to both her and Andrew Garfield because they killed it. Next up for the good, I have the story. Now, I thought this story had a really good message behind it. Essentially, this movie is about cherishing those little moments and living in the now. They do tell this story out of order by jumping around to different parts of the past and then back to the present. And given that this is a movie that you could, very well guess what's going to happen and how this is all going to turn out, I thought this was a really good way to tell this story. In my opinion, that really kept me engaged because you were continuously finding out new things about the characters and their relationship. But I also think it made this movie that much more sad because during all the sadness in this movie, they would sprinkle in some little wholesome moments that would make you smile, but then in the back of your mind, you kind of knew the impending doom that was going to happen to these characters, so you knew they didn't have many more of those sweet, wholesome moments left. And that right there is really the whole point, in my opinion, of this movie, is that life is fragile and you have to cherish those little moments when you get them. And finally, for the good, I have the humor. Now, as sad as this movie was, they did do a good job at breaking up those sad and heavy moments with some very well-timed humor, in my opinion. And honestly, it made this movie just as funny as it is sad. There was a scene in this movie where Florence Pugh gives birth to their daughter, and it may be one of the funniest scenes in the movie, in my opinion, and without spoiling it, just watching Andrew Garfield himself in that scene was one of the most entertaining things I've ever seen. My favorite part of this humor, though, is that it never pulled away from the weight of those more serious moments. It always happened at the perfect time and felt natural and unforced. Moving on to the so-so, and the only thing I have here is that as good as this story was, I would be lying to you if I told you that it won't feel like something that you've seen before. I mean, I think we've all seen a love story where someone in the relationship gets sick and now that couple tries to soak in every moment that they have left together. It's a pretty common thing in this genre. And even though this movie is completely its own thing and does a great job at telling its story, I was sitting there like, okay, I've seen this story before, just told in a different way. And finally, getting into the bad, and the only thing I have here is that this is kind of a slower moving movie. Now, for me, I didn't really have a problem with it because I thought this thing did a great job at keeping you engaged, staged, but if this type of movie isn't your cup of tea, I could definitely see someone saying, hey man, that movie was slow and boring. And I guess this is just gonna come down to personal preference at the end of the day. Now, by nature, these types of movies do have a slower pace, and for me, I enjoyed this movie all the way through, so that slower pace didn't really bother me. But all in all, We Live in Time is a really good movie. It's sad, but it does have enough humor to lighten the mood. It's carried by two great performances and had a great story about cherishing those little moments, so yes, this is one that I would recommend you go see. Those are my thoughts on We Live in Time. Be sure to let me know what you thought of the movie down in the comments, and as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shopeasyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.